At the very beginning of Skyrim, you're faced with a decision that you have almost no context for. You're riding in a cart toward Helgen, you've been captured by the Imperials, you're being taken to an execution for a crime you didn't commit. And sadly, you don't even know who arrested you. You don't know what war you've been pulled into. And you definitely don't know why your name isn't even on the list of prisoners. And yet, you're about to die anyway. Right as your head is about to be cut off, a dragon appears and saves you. Ironically, the dragon is Alduin, the very threat that you'll spend the entire game trying to defeat. But right after escaping Helgen, the game quietly gives you a decision that might affect your entire playthrough. Two people tell you to follow them. Ralof, a Stormcloak rebel, or Hadvar, a soldier of the Empire. And most players, myself included, probably followed Ralof. Because what do we see? We just watched the Empire try to execute an innocent person. Who wouldn't side with a rebellion? But here's the interesting thing. You make that decision with almost no real information. You don't know the political situation. You don't know the history between the Stormcloaks and the Empire. And you don't know who Ulfric really is. You're making a huge decision based on a moment of emotion. And that kind of decision making isn't unique to Skyrim. It's how people make decisions in real life all the time. Before we go any further, I'm curious. Who did you follow the first time you played Skyrim? And did you ever change your mind on a different playthrough? Now, when you first escape Helgen, the Stormcloaks look like the obvious good guys. They're rebels, they're fighting an empire, they talk about freedom and independence. And historically, most of us love the story of a rebellion fighting against an oppressive government. But if you actually play through the entire Civil War storyline, things start to get a little more complicated. Because Hadvar isn't a bad guy. In fact, he's one of the few people who actually recognizes the mistake at Helgen. He even tries to help you escape. He's just a soldier following orders. And that's where Skyrim starts to introduce one of its biggest themes. Good people exist on both sides of a conflict. Ralof genuinely believes he's fighting for Skyrim's freedom. Hadvar genuinely believes he's protecting the stability of the Empire. Neither one of them is evil. They're just working within two different systems. And this is something we see in real life all of the time. People on opposing sides of an issue often believe they're doing the right thing. Because they're fighting on different sides, they assume the other side must be wrong. Or even worse, that the other side must be evil. Skyrim rarely gives you decisions that are purely good or purely bad. Instead, it gives you decisions where both sides believe they're justified. And that makes it a lot more interesting. Now, one of the most interesting parts of the Helgen decisions is that the players don't choose based on data. They choose based on emotion and framing. Let's look at what the player actually experiences. You see the Empire execute prisoners, you're about to be executed yourself, and the executioner literally tells you to step forward even though you're innocent. So when Ralof says, "Follow me," it feels like the obvious choice. But think about something, because Hadvar is the only one who actually acknowledges their mistake. As you're trying to escape, he tells you to stay close to the wall. He's actively trying to help you survive, so logically speaking, he's probably the safer person to follow. But emotionally, most of us still follow the Stormcloaks. And that's because humans tend to make decisions based on the story they've built in their head rather than acknowledging the full information available. The story in that moment is simple. The Empire is bad, and the rebels are good. But the deeper you go into the storylines, the narrative starts to unravel. And suddenly you realize the situation isn't as simple as it looked in the beginning. Now, have you ever changed your mind about which side is right after different playthroughs? Because I definitely have. Now, another example in Skyrim is that they force you to make decisions with incomplete information all the time. This happens in Whiterun. You walk into the Bannered Mare to meet a woman named Saadia. She tells you she's being hunted by a group of Alakir warriors. According to her, she spoke out against a corrupt government in Hammerfell, and now they want her dead. Pretty clear story, right? But then you find the Alakir warriors, and they tell a completely different version. According to them, Saadia is actually the traitor. They claim that she sold out her city to the Aldmeri Dominion, and now she's running from justice. But here's the interesting bit. The game never actually confirms which one is telling the truth. You just have to decide who you believe. You can help Saadia escape, or you can turn her over to the Kematu. But either way, you're making a decision without knowing the full story. And that's something Skyrim does incredibly well, because it puts you in situations where you realize that certainty is rare, and most of the time, you're just making the best decision you can with the information that you have. So I'm curious about this one too. Did you help the Redguard woman, or did you side with Kematu? And more importantly, why? Another example in Skyrim is the Civil War itself, because it eventually leads to one of the most memorable battles in the game, the Battle of Whiterun. And depending on which side you choose, you'll either be defending the city that most of us spend our time in, or you'll be invading it. Now think about that for a second. Whiterun is going to be one of the first cities you go into. It's where you meet the companions. It's where you buy your first house most of the time. And it's probably where you sell most of your loot, even throughout the game. It becomes familiar and comfortable, and then suddenly you're expected to attack it, or defend it. From a storytelling perspective, it's brilliant, because now your decision isn't just political, it's personal. If you side with the Stormcloaks, you're literally attacking the city you've spent hours helping. If you side with the Empire, you're defending it from a rebellion that believes they're fighting for freedom. Neither side feels completely right, but you still have to choose. And once again, most players don't make this decision based on detailed political knowledge. They make it based on how they feel about the characters involved, the various Jarls, the companions, Stormcloaks, and Imperials. Now, it's exactly how people make decisions in real conflict in real life as well. How many times are you defending not the actions of somebody, but the person themselves? Or vice versa. How many times are you attacking the person instead of attacking their actions? Now, the Thieves Guild is one of the best storylines in my own personal opinion, and it's another example of the moral gray areas in Skyrim. When you first join them in Riften, it doesn't feel that bad. You're stealing a few items, running some schemes, intimidating a couple shopkeepers that seem kinda shady to begin with. But over time you realize that the guild survives by extorting the people of Riften. They threaten businesses, they manipulate the local economy, and yet the game frames them as somewhat sympathetic. They're struggling. Their influence has declined. They talk about restoring the guild to its former glory, and suddenly your crimes start to feel justified. Because now it feels like you're helping a group that's fallen on hard times. Now this is something psychologists often refer to as moral justification, because people rationalize unethical behavior if they believe it's helping their group. And RPGs like Skyrim make the process incredibly visible. You may start out thinking, I'll just do a couple of missions, and before long you're fully invested in rebuilding a criminal organization. So here's another question. Did you complete the Thieves Guild storyline? And an even better question, did you give the skeleton key back? Now, one of the best parts about Skyrim is how it's an RPG that assists in revealing your character. One of the reasons games like Skyrim are so interesting is they remove real-world consequences. If you steal something in real life, there are serious consequences. In Skyrim, you reload a save. Because of that freedom, RPGs become something like a moral playground. You can test decisions, experiment with different paths, and play as completely different types of people. A ruthless assassin, a noble hero, a wandering thief, a stealth archer, if we're being honest. And sometimes the decisions you make in these games say something interesting about you. Not because they define your character in real life, but because they show what choices you make when you're given total freedom, when nothing's forcing you to behave a certain way. And that's what makes Skyrim so memorable. It isn't just about dragons or magic or exploration. It's about seeing the kind of person you become when the game stops telling you what the right answer is. Now, Skyrim is often remembered for its massive world, exploration, and of course the dragons mentioned earlier. But underneath all of that is something a little more interesting. It's a game about decisions. And more importantly, it's a game about making decisions without perfect information. You decide who to trust. You decide who to help. And you decide who deserves mercy and who deserves punishment. And most of the time, the game never tells you if you made the right choice, which is very similar to real life. We rarely have all the information, we rarely know the full story, and yet we still have to decide. Maybe the real lesson from Skyrim isn't just about defeating Alduin. Maybe it's about learning how to navigate a complicated world where good and bad aren't always obvious, and where the decisions you make say more about you than they do about the game itself. Before we wrap up, I want to ask one more question, and I want you to leave it in the comments. Looking back at your various playthroughs of Skyrim, what decision did you struggle with the most, and what decision did you regret the most? Was it the Civil War, Saadia and Kematu, Thieves Guild, Parthenax, or something else entirely? I'd love to hear what choices stood out to you. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you could like and subscribe, and as always, I hope you can be well.